This is the Millennium Bridge in the heart of London, soon to be reopened to the public. I say reopened because the first time it opened 18 months ago, something happened that was not only unusual and unpredicted, but completely new to engineering science. The bridge wobbled. The question is, why did it wobble and what are they doing to fix it? Over the last few weeks, thousands of you have written into the website asking scientific questions. And the one we want to answer this week is, why did the Millennium Bridge wobble? So I've brought the shack to Tate Modern, because the Millennium Bridge runs from Tate Modern right across the river to St Paul's Cathedral. The Millennium Bridge is a stunning aluminium and steel structure. A bit of great design and engineering that had thousands of people queuing to walk across it on opening day, 10th of June 2000. But as soon as the crowds hit the bridge, there was a problem. It wobbled, and not just a bit, but enough to make people cling to the handrails for security. Clearly, the crowds themselves were driving the bridge in a completely unexpected and very worrying way. The bridge was closed 3 days later and has remained closed ever since. But how could this have happened? Why wasn't it predicted? And how can they fix the bridge without destroying its wonderful looks? Well, the team and I are building our own Millennium Bridge, or at least a bridge simulator. This is it. And we hope that this will precisely mimic the action of the real Millennium Bridge. And once we've got it finished, we want to investigate both the physical structure of the bridge and why it wobbled, and also what it felt like for the people who were on it. Now, our simulated bridge is quite hard to understand because there's so much scaffolding. So I built a toy version here, lined up exactly with it. So the river is flowing that way and the bridge is going across that way. We're interested in a section of decking, which on the real bridge is 4 meters wide. It's going to be exactly the same on our simulated bridge. The critical thing is the suspension. It's a suspension bridge. We've got it hung on bits of string, and that allows it to wobble like that. Now, our simulated bridge, we couldn't hang it on string. We didn't think the string would take the weight, and so it's actually suspended on these box sections of steel, this black stuff here, and we hope that will allow this to wobble in exactly the same way as the big bridge behind me. To make sure our simulator does what the real bridge did, we appealed on the website for people who had been there on opening day.
It really started moving sideways and slightly up and down, rather like being on a boat.
Yeah, it felt unstable and it was very windy. And I remember it had lots of flags up and down the side, so you could definitely... There was something going on sideways, it felt, maybe.
Not up and down?
No.
And not forwards and backwards?
No.
Just side to side. About how much was it moving, do you think?
It was about,
I mean, that much or this much?
about the second one.
This much?
Yeah.
At least six to 8 inches, I would have thought, yes.
Right, so at least this much.
Oh, yes.
I remember wanting to get off.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it did. It
So it
felt
was enough
odd.
to be scary?
Yeah, but I thought that was just me.
Now tell me why you had to do this?
You had to do this because to keep your balance, because if you didn't keep your balance, then you'd just fall over about, like, to the left or right, about 4 to 5 degrees.
So just show me how you walk normally. Right. And then show me what it was like when the bridge started to go. Right, so you had to deliberately push your feet out sideways.
Yes.
And short steps.
That's right, yes.
Right.
And it seemed obvious to me that it was probably the number of people on it.
Were they deliberately walking in step or anything like that?
No, they just had to conform to the movement of the bridge.
Of course, among those present were the engineers who had built the bridge and thought they knew it inside out.
We estimated that up to 100,000 people crossed the bridge that day.
100,000?
Yeah. And there were up to 2,000 people at any one time on the bridge deck.
And what did it feel like? You were on it, yeah?
Yeah. What was happening was that sporadically, it wasn't continuous, but sporadically there were these sideways movements. The bridge was actually moving only about 50 to 70 millimetres in each direction.
That's only that much?
Yes, exactly. Quite a small movement, but that resulted in something that felt quite uncomfortable, and at its worst, people were having to hold on to the balustrades to walk properly. So it was a large movement.
Did anyone get hurt?
No.
Right. So it was quite small.
Yes.
But real.
Absolutely.
You thought, oh, bother.
I felt I was disappointed about it. We'd spent a lot of time designing this bridge, and we'd analysed it, we'd checked it to codes, to heavier loads than the codes, and here it was doing something that we didn't know about.
Yes.
The most dramatic and shocking footage shows whole sections of the crowd, hundreds of people, apparently rocking from side to side in unison, not only with each other, but with the bridge. This synchronised movement seemed to be driving the bridge. But how could the crowd become synchronised? Was there something special about the Millennium Bridge that caused this effect? This was to be the focus of the investigation.
Well, at last, the simulated bridge is finished, and I can make it wobble. Now, Alan, this is all your fault, isn't it?
Yes.
You designed this, yes? This
Yes.
simulated bridge, and this, you reckon, mimics the action of the real bridge?
It captures a lot of the physics, yes.
Right, so if we get on it, we should be able to wobble it, yes?
Alan McRoby is a bridge engineer from Cambridge who wrote to me suggesting that a bridge simulator ought to wobble in the same way as the real bridge, provided we hung it on pendulums of exactly the right length.
This one's only a couple of tons, but so it's fairly easy to get going.
Well, it's
just by walking.
It's certainly going now.
Don't have to be a real vandal, just walk and it starts to go.
It's actually quite difficult to walk. You have to be careful when you put your feet down, don't you? Because if you get it wrong, it just throws you off your feet.
It certainly affects the way you walk, yes. You can't walk normally on it.
No, if you try and put one foot in front of another, it's moving your feet away from under you.
Yes.
So you've got to put your feet out sideways.
So already the simulator is making me walk in exactly the same way as our witnesses walked on the real bridge.
The ice skating gate, there is another sort of snake way of walking.
For a more convincing experiment, I wanted my own opening day crowd, the Science Shack team. Their instructions, just walk normally.
It's really intriguing because none of these people is trying to drive it. They're all having some difficulty walking. And the only way you can walk comfortably is by getting in step. But then, of course, everyone is driving the bridge. You can't help it. You're actually forced by the movement of the bridge to get into step and therefore to drive it to move further.
We all know how it felt being on the bridge, but I wanted to measure exactly what was happening, so we asked Joan Lazenby from Cambridge to help. She began by attaching tiny lights to Pete, one on each of his leg joints. The first job is to calibrate the cameras so they exclude the background and see only the markers on Pete's legs.
OK, give us a walk.
As he moves, the computer simultaneously records the positions of all the markers, as seen by all the cameras.
OK, the bridge is moving. Now, Pete, could you start walking towards us? He just has to walk, does he?
Yes.
You actually need to practice quite a bit till you get the timing right. And back again.
So, we're beginning to understand how people walked on the bridge once it was moving. But how did the movement begin? How did the people become synchronized?
Now, I wanted to try an experiment with a crowd of people because there is at least one theory that says that if a whole lot of people are walking together, all their actions tend to get synchronized, even if they don't do it deliberately. And luckily, we've got a whole lot of people we appealed on the website and also roped in a lot of people off the street. Now, can everyone hear me? Are you ready? Well, get ready then, quickly, please. Right. Now, all I want you to do is to walk up between these tapes, all right, naturally, happily, close together, and then round the back and round again. Right, are you ready? It'd be nice in the cold, wouldn't it, to get walking? Are you ready? Walk. Well, they're certainly walking. The question is, do they all tend to get in step? We haven't said anything to them.
Well, some people are in step some of the time, but I'm not very convinced.
What I'd like to see is whether it makes any difference if I play some music. So I think, without telling them anything, I'm just going to switch the music on.
We didn't ask people to walk in step, but with the external beat of the music at 90 beats a minute, that's exactly what they did. But double the speed and far fewer people are synchronized. The 3/4 waltz time really confuses people. So, not a controlled experiment, but it seems our crowd hardly ever got synchronized on their own and ignored the very fast beat and the waltz beat. But give them an external signal at about walking pace and the whole crowd can get into step. Synchronization happens in nature too. Male fireflies in Southeast Asia signal to the females by lighting up their bottoms. But the amazing thing is what happens to the crowd. All the fireflies seem to light up at the same time. They flash in synchronization. The question is, did the crowds on the bridge somehow become synchronized like fireflies, or is something else going on? Perhaps Joan's motion capture results will give us a clue.
Right, yeah, this is the first go at tracking one of the data sets of Peter on the bridge when it was swinging.
So those blue things are Pete's legs cut off at the waist?
They are.
3D Pete does what we knew already, walking with his legs much further apart than usual. You can also see that his ankles twist in a rather odd way.
And as far as you've seen from watching other people in similar circumstances, everyone walks in more or less the same way.
More or less.
But now you can also work out how the legs move with the bridge. He looks like an ice skater. As the left foot goes down, the bridge moves left. As the right foot goes down, the bridge moves right. It looks almost as if Pete is pushing the bridge. And he is perfectly synchronized with it.
As you walk, you have to wait for the bridge to go left before you put your right foot down, and for it to go right before you put your left foot down.
It's probably easiest not to think about it. If you just
Look, Alan and I are in perfect sync, without music or flashing lights or other signals. But how do we do it?
You're just trying to stand up, and you'll find that this is a fairly safe, comfortable way to respond to what would otherwise be a very vigorous environment that's quite disconcerting.
So, let me get this straight. The wobbling of the bridge forces me to change the gait, the way I put my feet down.
Yes.
And I have to put them not only a long way apart, but also exactly in step with the movement, because otherwise I fall over.
And everyone starts to do this, and everyone starts to feed energy in, because it's easier to walk that way.
Yes. In fact,
So, crowds on our bridge seem to become synchronized simply as a result of individuals trying to stay upright. But does that square with what the engineers found on the real bridge? Their first tests were with just 100 people, and if they were all on one span, just 100 were enough to get the bridge moving. Arab had expected the small sideways force we all exert when we walk to cancel itself out in a crowd walking in a random way. But when they're in sync, the forces instead add up and become enough to wobble the bridge, just as on our simulator.
We seem to sense sideways movements much more easily. We're much more sensitive to them than we are to vertical movements. And we found that we would actually adjust our step to those movements as we were walking along the moving surface. I think it is this thing of just trying to stay stable. It's not a deliberate decision. And in fact, in some of our experiments, we asked people if they thought they'd adjusted their steps, and they said no. But we could see from our experimental results that they had adjusted their steps without being aware. So even though the force that you exert sideways as an individual is very small, once people actually sense a movement and adjust their step to it, they all lock in. There's a positive feedback effect, and they all lock into the same movement. And that makes this far larger force, which causes the bridge to move.
And the people become not just people, but sort of bridge drivers.
Yes, you could call them. In fact, we coined a term for them, which was tuned active exciters. That is, they're actually tuning themselves. We tune ourselves to the bridge as we walk over it. And as I say, it's not a deliberate decision. It's not. It's nobody's fault. It's
tuned active exciters. Yeah, I think I'll be a tuned active exciter.
Yes,
yeah,
well,
great.
I hope not.
Well, I can find some other bridges, can't I?
But there is a further big question. We now know that people can sync up with a moving bridge. But why was the bridge moving in the first place? Is it usual for suspension bridges to move?
This is the Humber Bridge. It's the longest single-span suspension bridge in the country. And I'm about to go up that tower. Oh, wow. How high are we here?
160 metres, around about.
160 metres above the river.
Yeah.
That's about 159 more than I'd like to be. It's very, very long bridge, isn't it?
We're the third longest in the world.
Third longest in the world.
So from here to the other tower is 1,410 metres.
That's not far short of a mile, is it?
Getting on that way.
So how much does this wobble in the middle?
It doesn't wobble, that's not the verb we use. It moves, in the design wind, it moves about 4.5 metres sideways.
4.5 metres?
Doesn't do it suddenly, of course, because there's a big inertia in a bridge like this.
But does it go, backwards and forwards like this?
It moves as the wind changes.
Yeah.
So it's a static force from the wind that's moving it that distance.
I biked across it and I felt it bouncing in the middle when a truck goes past.
Yeah.
So it's clearly quite flexible.
It's designed to move, obviously, and if you had the whole bridge full of traffic, the centre of the bridge goes down by 3 metres. So the movements are big, but they're not rapid.
Now, I'd like to demonstrate what a very peculiar sort of suspension bridge that Millennium Bridge is. So I built my own suspension bridge. Question is, will it take my weight? It's sinking 2 or 3 inches, I think. But it's taking my weight. Terrific. So it does work in suspension. Now you'll notice I've done a rather cunning thing with this bridge. On this side, I've suspended it high. You see, this is about 4 feet above the deck, whereas this side is suspended low, only about 1 foot above the deck. And this side, the low suspension, is much more like the Millennium Bridge. And I'll show you a very odd consequence of that. That on the high side, the tension in this is quite low. Listen. A sort of low thud, whereas this one, I reckon that's about an octave higher, which suggests to me that the tension is twice as high in the low-slung bridge. And that is one of the curious features of the Millennium Bridge.
The cables of the Millennium Bridge are very flat to give the beautiful low profile, and they carry about 2,000 tons of tension. So, although all suspension bridges move, the Millennium Bridge has ended up with a frequency of movement that turns out to be absolutely crucial.
One of the vital corner pieces of this scientific jigsaw is the natural rate of wobble, or resonance. Now, most things resonate when you bash them. Boxes, guitar strings go doing, and the frequency depends both on the length of the string and on the tension in the string. Now, each of these sticks with a ball on the top is like a pendulum, an upside-down pendulum. So if I let this one go, you can see it has a natural frequency, and this one here is longer, and the frequency is slower. It has a natural longer period, and this one is shorter, and it resonates more quickly. Now, what's really interesting is that you can get into step with those natural frequencies. So suppose I move the whole lot backwards and forwards. If I do it quite slowly, then the big, long pendulum will start to move, and if I'm just in step, I need only move my fingers millimetres, and the ball is moving 20 or 30 centimetres. What's more, if I then increase the rate without increasing the movement of my fingers very much, the big ball stops moving and the middle one is now moving enormously, and again my fingers are moving only a short amount. And then if I go faster still, I can get the shorter one moving and the others don't pay much attention. And it's this getting into step which drives the resonance, which is what happened on the bridge. The bridge is an enormous heavy thing and people walking on it are very light. But because they are pushing it again and again in step, then they begin to make it resonate. And the fact is that the natural resonant frequency of the Millennium Bridge is about 1 revolution a second, 1 vibration a second. And that happens by pure chance to be about the rate at which people put their every other foot frequency as the bridge. Now, couldn't you possibly have foreseen this?
Well, we know that people exert this sideways force, but as I say, this big difference is the feedback loop. So that doesn't exist in standards or codes. We can't find any bridge which has been designed for that so far, and we can't find any quantification of that before we did the tests on the Millennium Bridge.
You say that the wobble of the bridge is driven by people walking essentially in step. But to start with, they're all out of step. They're just walking randomly. I mean, and our witnesses have said that, definitely.
Yes.
So why does the bridge start to move?
Although they're walking randomly, there still is a small sideways force. Imagine you've got, say, 400 people on the bridge.
Okay.
Each of those people is applying a force, all at random, but all of those little random fluctuations don't add up to nothing. 400 people walking at random is about the same as 20 people walking in step.
Really?
So that gets it going a little bit.
OK, now I begin to understand, because once you've got 20 people giving it a bit of movement, that quickly forces the others to get into step.
The other people feel it, they adjust the way they walk, and then the other 380 join in. And so instead of getting something about size 20, you get something about size 400. The forces are not due to 20, the random effects of the 400, they're due to the full 400 walking in step.
So that's pretty disconcerting. If you're designing a bridge, you expect all these people to be walking at random and to have only this 20 people, if you like. And yet suddenly it was not 20 but 400.
That's right. They didn't expect people to walk in step involuntarily. The people didn't expect to walk in step.
Right. But they were forced to by the bridge.
Yes.
Very bad luck, that.
Yes.
Okay. You try one at each end? Yeah.
I think that at last I understand the bridge, but how can we fix it? Our plan is to try to eat up the energy that walkers are putting into the bridge with dampers, in this case, shock absorbers from a Vauxhall Astra. Alan reckons that we'll need about 5.
Let me show you how you might damp a wobbly bridge. Here we have 2 sections of a wobbly bridge, all right? And they wobble together like that. They're suspended in exactly the same way, so they wobble almost exactly the same. And now I'm going to damp one of them. Here is a little bath of oil, just cooking oil. I'll put that on there, and then in here I dip a spoon so it dips into the oil, a bent spoon. Now I'll pull them back the same amount and let go, and you'll see that this has stopped wobbling in about a swing and a half, whereas the other one goes on and on. So very quickly what happens is that all the energy is dissipated into moving the oil. And the neat thing is you can tune the damping to match the oscillations of the bridge by changing either the viscosity of the fluid or the size of the spoon. I want to measure scientifically how efficient these dampers are. So we've got 2 women up here to drive the bridge, and we've got Linda down here with a chart recorder, and she's going to record the movements of the bridge. OK, are you all ready? Poised.
First, without the dampers.
3, go! And you can see the movements building up as they walk backwards and forwards, or sway anyway. And we've got a lovely sine wave. And we're now reaching roughly maximum amplitude, so walkers, 1, 2, 3, stop! And that was where they stopped. And you can see the trace dying away. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th wave is just about dead. So it's taken 5 complete sine waves to die away virtually to nothing. Now the question is, what will happen when we put the dampers in? Now we've got our 5 dampers in. How much difference will that make to the rate of decay of swing? OK, swingers, get swinging. Right, chart woman. Come on, put some welly into it. They are having some difficulty in getting it going, so obviously the damper's having some effect. I don't think you've had enough breakfast, you two.
So the dampers have flattened the sideways movement of the bridge.
I think we need some more weight on the bridge. Could we have some more volunteers to swing, please? Yeah, push from below. That's better. We're getting some movement now. Good. OK, swingers, 1, 2, 3, stop! That's absolutely staggering. Right, let's have the original one. Thank you very much. Now, this was what it looked like without the dampers. All right, just wind on a bit, Winder Woman. Go on, stop there. Lovely. Now, look at the colossal difference. That's where I stopped it. Without the dampers on, we did 5 swings. With the dampers on, well, it's about 1. It's just gone splat. The whole thing has completely stopped swinging. So clearly, the dampers can damp down the movement very rapidly indeed. Indeed, I suspect with these 2 young things on there, we don't need as many as 5. But perhaps with a big multitude on the bridge, 5 would be safe. Terrific. Triumph for damping. Right. And, competition, was it?
Yeah.
On the real bridge, Roger's team are close to finishing fitting their dampers.
And was it you who put the...
They're using 2 main sorts. One has a 3-ton moving weight connected to a paddle stirring a pot of oil, rather like my tiny version. There are 16 of these. Then there are 30 shock absorbers, a bit more high-tech than the car versions on my bridge, but working in just the same way.
So how much are you damping this bridge?
We're adding an enormous amount of damping. We're adding up to 20 times the amount of damping you might expect, and it's perhaps more damping than in any other bridge that I'm aware of.
It seems to me you should stop being so defensive and claim credit for this major advance in bridge technology.
What we'd like to do is open the bridge so that people can use it again, and then we are working on getting this into codes and publishing our information as much as possible.
Great.
And then we can move on.
Once all the dampers are fitted, the Millennium Bridge will be tested again and should be open in the new year.
Now, you are the Pearly Kings and Queens, right? You went on the Millennium Bridge when it first opened, yes?
Yes.
And it wobbled.
It wobbled, it was like that. And she said to me, "What is it, George?" I said, "They've forgotten to tighten up the bolt." You remember? Yeah.
Terrific. Well, now, we can't go on the real bridge, but we built our own bridge and we got it all damped so it doesn't wobble.
Yeah.
So, as is traditional with pretend bridges, can we ask you to cut the ribbon and declare it open?
On behalf of the Pearly Kings and Queens, the Pearly Guild, which is 100 years old tomorrow,
wonderful.
next year, right, I declare this bridge officially open.
This isn't just a frivolous celebration. We needed a bunch of tuned active exciters for our bridge, and even under their rhythmical stimulation, the bridge performs faultlessly.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. I don't know how they can do it, particularly in this icy cold. But I'm sorry to say that's the end of this programme and the end of the series. So, see you next year when the bridge will be well and truly open.